so much to talk about.
Okay, the recording has begun.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, all, and welcome to the first Park and Beautification Committee for 2025. I will say that I don't know what you believe in, but let's say that the powerful God has provided us, has granted us another year together, and I am so grateful for that. I wish you all the best, and I hope that we can have a beautiful, beautiful year again for 2025. We work a lot for 2024, and 2025 is coming beautifully for us. My name is Berlotte Antoine. I am the chair for the Parks and Beautification Committee. We have a co-chair, Miss Trisha Luison. She's not yet on this call, but she will come in later. But quickly, I will call your name, and I will ask you to give your full name for the record and one wish for yourself or for someone else. Miss Flores has the privilege to start first. Welcome, Miss Flores. Good evening.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm happy to be the first. It's my first time here. My name is Marcela Flores, and one wish I have for the community is on snowy days like this, I hope that some of our elderly neighbors have somebody to clean their sidewalks for them. And I happily offer my children.
Thank you. Thank you. The second on my list is Mr. Ojo. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeremiah Ojo, artist, designer, entrepreneur, based here in Flatbush, East 25th and Clarendon. My wish is that we have more green space in our community. We need more parks, and the parks we have need to be renovated and activated with young people, old people, all people.
Great. Thank you. Miss Audrey, you are next. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. My wish is for peace, because what I'm hearing on the news of Mr. Trump starting war, that's not good. So my wish is for peace and health.
Thank you. The next one on my list is Miss Cheryl Sodders. Miss Cheryl, you are next.
Yes. Good night, everyone. And I wish for myself and for the community, I missed an important meeting at 6 o'clock, and I wish that we will never miss any meetings for the rest of the year. Thank you.
Great. I love that. The next one on my list is Miss Adele Bennett. Good evening.
Good evening, all. I would say a happy, prosperous, healthy New Year for everyone in this community.
Thank you. And Miss Linda Turner, good evening.
Good evening, all. My name is Linda Turner, and my wish for 2025 is for peace also, because like my committee member, I got problems with Trump. But anyway, peace for all, good health for all, and productivity for the committee.
Thank you. We also have some of our presenters here. We have Miss Deborah. Good evening.
Hi there. How are you all? Thanks for inviting us to be with you tonight, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We also have Echo on the line. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for having us on this meeting. I'm excited.
Good evening, Naima.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I wish you all health and prosperity in the new year.
Good evening,
Thank
Nicole
you.
Julius. Good evening.
Good evening. Happy New Year to everyone. Wishing everybody wealth, health, prosperity. I pray as a community we could work together in unison to achieve goals for the community. And what I would like to see in this community is, as far as green spaces, to have a community garden.
Yes, thank you so much. And last but not least, I have Miss Vonita Sylvester. Sylvester, good evening.
Hi, Happy New Year. I wish for everyone to have joy. I do wish for peace. I hope we're not going into World War III. And I wish for good health for everyone. And increasing the amount of green space would definitely help with that by giving people more places to go outdoors and have more physical activity.
Thank you. Thank you. Co-chair Trisha Luison, good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. One of our member, Miss Turner, suggested a beautiful thing because we have two presentation. I will ask for a motion to add the second presentation on the agenda and move one item out of the agenda, which is a discussion on our last event. Can I have someone to for this motion? Because anyone want to make a motion to move? Yes. Who is I? Someone just.
Vanetta Sylvester. I said I make a motion to.
Thank you. Can I have someone to second this motion to move one item of the agenda and add the presentation to this agenda for today's agenda?
Nicole Julia, second that motion.
Yes, thank you. For now, I will ask the presenter, my first presenter, to for the composting for beginners, to see if you can introduce yourself and share your video, your PowerPoint. Sorry. So today we have Lower East Side Ecology Center for a presentation on composting for beginners. I'm excited for that because a couple of people mentioned beautifying our neighborhood, and I think composting is one step that we can utilize. We can master that at some point and use that to beautify our neighborhood. So let's start with that. For people who didn't introduce themselves, we'll do that later on because some people will be coming, but we need to start with that presentation right now. Please let us know if you can share your presentation, introduce yourself, and let us know if you can share. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that lovely introduction about composting. I'm absolutely in agreement. I'm going to try and share my screen and let's see how this goes. All right. I'm sharing a window and I want this window and okay, I'm going to go into slideshow mode. Can everyone see this? I also can't. Okay, great. I can't see anyone right now. So if there are any questions that you have or anything like that, feel free to just plop them in the chat and I'll try and go through this not too speedily, but with enough time to answer questions as needed and also move on. So hello again.
I can ask anyone to raise their hand if they have a question, and then I will let you know. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm also happy to put my email in the chat afterwards if people have additional questions. But yeah. So thank you all so much for having the Ecology Center as a guest today. My name is Echo. I use any and all pronouns. I am one of the community engagement coordinators at Lower East Side Ecology Center, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the composting process and how it works. Awesome. So just the agenda for today. So we're going to be talking about what is compost, what composting actually is and what we mean when we say that, who can compost and where can it even happen, why it's really important. We're going to get into the bread and butter of composting, what does the composting process actually look like, what the composting options are in New York City, and if there's time at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions. Cool. So we'll start with what compost actually is. So compost is it's a soil amendment. It's not soil, not to be confused, right? It's used to improve soil health. It's basically comprised almost entirely of organic matter, and with a couple of living organisms in there, our decomposers that break down our compost ingredients for us. It's the equivalent of something called humus, excuse me, which is a type of organic matter that forms like without human management. So if you think of like leaves on a forest floor kind of turning into that like dark substance that you see on the top layer of soil, that's humus, and compost is kind of similar to that. But we as people are the ones stewarding that process and creating it. I talked a little bit about our decomposer friends. So like what the composting process is and like who is actually like composting, right? So the things that break down our compost ingredients are going to be any number of these different chemical and physical decomposers that you see on the picture to the right. So they can be like bugs, invertebrates, fungi, and bacteria. But composting, so the process is just going to be like the human managed biological process of decomposition. So our goal when we compost is to maintain like a really good environment in our compost pile for our decomposer friends to thrive and kind of just do their thing. So a little bit different from just like decomposition. So decomposition is going to happen no matter what, right? If you think of like bread going moldy, and I'm thinking of like the lettuce I have in the back of my fridge that I definitely need to put in a drop-off site because it's decomposing without me touching it, right? So that's kind of what composting is. So getting into like why composting is important and why we should compost. So it really boils down to kind of like 3 key things. We're trying to divert like organic waste from landfills. There's the climate resilience and environmental justice component of it. Really trying to avoid like organics going into landfills and breaking down and releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, thinking about how a lot of landfills and waste transfer sites are located in predominantly low income Black and brown neighborhoods, right? And another thing that we really want to be doing, like for New York City especially, and we're talking a lot about like we want to see more green spaces in the city, right? So compost is a soil amendment. It's going to help restore degraded, damaged, compacted soil. And just a little bit more like specifics about that. So we talked about landfills. So organic waste that ends up in landfills breaks down, it gets all smushed and is not really exposed to a lot of air. So it breaks down anaerobically, so without the presence of oxygen. So that process releases a greenhouse gas called methane, which is a lot more potent than carbon dioxide. It just stays in the atmosphere for longer. So universal composting is not only going to minimize that emission stream, but also we're going to divert carbon and return it back to its original carbon sink, which is the soil. And then I just wanted to kind of include this visual from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. This is just kind of a way to visualize like what like solutions are preferable to like reducing food waste that gets sent to landfills. So aside from like, you know, towards the top, like we have like the most preferred, and towards the bottom is the least preferred. So aside from like source reduction or redirecting food to people who are perhaps facing food insecurity, doing stuff like composting at like small local scales, whether that's like in a community garden or maybe a more like municipal level composting site that takes food scraps from a lot of different places, and just being able to use that soil amendment locally to steward our green spaces is much more, you know, preferable to like organics and food waste going into, say, the landfill and incinerator and getting like, you know, being burnt and creating pollution, right? I do also want to mention one more thing, which does kind of, we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but this visual also includes something called anaerobic digestion. This is not the same thing as composting, but it is just a way to also divert organics from landfills in a way that it's digested in like a digester egg, and it kind of it's used to create biogas and a bioslurry, which can then be used as an alternative for fossil fuels. So it's used to create like biofuels, basically. So having all of these options available to us in such a big city as like New York is going to be really, really important to be able to reduce the effects of climate change and steward our green spaces and communities and build community, right? So in talking about like soil remediation from compost, so a lot of New York City soil is very damaged from being compacted so much. So like a lot of concrete, a lot of buildings. So the soil that used to be underneath that, and sometimes the soil that you might see in like, say like a tree pit that you might see walking around is usually very damaged from stuff like compaction. There's also, you know, a legacy of heavy metal and lead contamination in New York City soil. And a lot of that is oftentimes lacking soil biodiversity. And so all of these things kind of make that like a risk for worsening the effects of climate change. So being able to steward that damaged soil with compost is going to help reduce a lot of these negative impacts of like having like existing in a place that has degraded soil. So it's going to improve like soil compaction, leave more space for plant roots to go where they need to go. It can immobilize pollutants, so it's not going to remove heavy metal, but it does a little chemistry thing where it changes the pH of the soil, and it kind of will just like immobilize things like lead, and plants won't be able to like take them up anymore. So it also restores soil biodiversity, and in doing all of those things, it helps a lot with stuff like flooding and stormwater runoff. But yeah, like to the right, this is just a visual of like the soil profile in New York City. So a lot of like construction debris, filter, not a whole lot of organic matter that I can see. But yeah, this is just kind of to get us thinking about like what it does for soil. So moving on to like how composting actually works. So how do you like even make compost, right? So there's like 4 factors that we as people steward in a pile that give us like really, really good compost. So you have your ingredients, like the main ingredients. We're going to talk about like the size and shape of a pile. A compost pile is also going to need moisture, water, and oxygen. So going into our like first factor, which is our ingredients, so the things that we mix together to make compost, we have like 2 main categories of ingredients. We've got browns, which are going to be like dry materials that are mostly like woody in nature, coming from like, yeah, like dried wood, trees. So these materials are usually more rich in carbon, and they're used to absorb excess moisture and also retain airflow. So that can be anything from like wood chips, dried leaves, cardboard, shredded paper, even like nutshells can be considered a brown. So it's stuff like that. And your browns are going to be like something that like a decomposer, like the decomposer fungi like to eat browns. So it's fungi food. And then we have greens, which are another subset of ingredients. These are going to be stuff like food scraps, fresh garden clippings, maybe a cut flower bouquet, a house plant that died. So like fresher, maybe like freshly dead, I guess, ingredients that are richer in nitrogen and hold a little bit of moisture, like so yeah, like food scraps, stuff like that. So generally for piles, depending on the size of your site, I'm not going to get too into detail with this, but in terms of like how much of each ingredient you need to add to create compost, it's generally recommended adding like 2 to 3 times as much browns in terms of volume as you do greens. But again, that is adjusted based on like what a site needs, how big it is, and a lot of other factors. But yeah, browns and greens, bread and butter of a compost pile. This is the stuff that's going to be broken down and turned into that soil amendment we love. Something else that we are managing as people are like the type of bin or container for your compost that you have, how big your pile is, and how perhaps exposed to the elements it is. Generally speaking, like this for pile size, it needs to be at least 1 cubic yard in volume. Reason for this being is that we're trying to achieve a high temperature in our compost pile to kill off stuff like weed seeds if you compost garden waste, and maybe like any pathogens that might be found in like gross food scraps, right? So we'll talk a little bit about temperature later. It is important, but I want to get through this first, and then we'll talk about temperature. But yeah, like generally, the larger your pile is, the hotter it's going to get. I kind of like to think of this as like the Earth's core is really, really hot, right? But think about that in comparison to like the sun's core, which is extremely hot and it makes helium, right? So small pile, still gonna get hot if it's at least 1 cubic yard, but the larger the pile, typically the hotter it's gonna get in the center. So that's a little bit about why like the size of your pile and how exposed it is to the elements is really important. Moving on to water and moisture of a pile. So I've got a couple of little visuals over here. Sometimes you got to water your pile. We're going to talk about what it means for a pile to be aerobic and anaerobic, as the little visual on the right says. But basically, decomposers need water just like us. It helps them reproduce and multiply. Typically for a compost pile, the ideal moisture level is like the consistency of a wrung out dish sponge. So if your pile is too wet, this is what actually can lead to it smelling like ammonia or leading to really like bad smells. If the moisture of a pile is well balanced with how much air is in the pile, your compost pile should not smell. Unless you like bury your face in it for whatever reason, you're smelling that compost. It should smell nice and earthy. So composting, if done right, it shouldn't smell bad. But checking for moisture levels, right? So the middle picture is showing a test that you can do for moisture in your pile. So this is called like the squeeze test or the ball test, but basically you just grab a handful of compost, you roll it into a ball, and you squeeze it. If it holds its shape in that ball and there isn't like rivulets of water dripping down your hand, you're probably fine in terms of moisture. If it starts dripping down your hand, it's too wet. And if it doesn't hold into a ball shape at all, it probably means it's a little too dry. So different ways to adjust that. If your pile is too wet, adding drier materials, so adding a bit more browns and mixing it in well to absorb excess water is one way to do that. And if it's a little too dry, you can water your pile, or maybe if you have a little bit more like fresh greens that are still kind of juicy, you can mix that in as well. So those are just some ways to steward moisture in the pile. So kind of on the flip side of this, I like to think of like water and air in a pile as being like a yin and yang, but aeration and oxygen. So making sure that our microbes have air to breathe. So this can be done in a couple of different ways, but basically what we want to take away is that compost is an aerobic process, which means it requires oxygen to happen. So there's a couple different ways to do this. You might have heard of like turning your compost or turning your pile. So that can be seen on the picture to the right. So this is just showing people like using tools like a digging fork, a shovel. You can also use like a crank to remix your pile in a way that temporarily adds air. And then on the left, there's a different kind of aeration system there. So this is called forced air. It's a bit more like passive, and if you have a system like this, like you don't have to like really turn your pile. Basically, what an aerated static pile is, or an ASP is, it just has like a PVC pipe running through the bottom of your pile. It's attached to an air blower, attached to electricity that is on a timer, and it blows air through your pile. So those are just some ways to manage for air in your pile. So as we steward all these 4 factors, making sure we have a good balance of them and we do it right, your compost pile should heat up significantly. So I really love this GIF. So yeah, that is steam rising from the compost pile. So compost gets really hot. The reason for this being is as organisms start like eating away at your ingredients and reproducing and multiplying, their activity in the pile is what's going to release heat into the pile. So temperature is important because it is an indicator to us kind of how well we're doing in creating our compost pile. So ideally, we're talking about something called thermophilic composting. So this is just like regular composting, but thermophilic just means like heat loving. So we're just basically creating a compost pile and it gets hot. But as you can see on this visual right here, thermophilic composting, the whole process can be broken down into roughly 3 stages. We've got 2 mesophilic stages at the beginning and end, and then the active thermophilic stage. So mesophilic just means like middle temperature. But yeah, so during the first stage, that's basically just like your pile creation. You're adding your browns, you're adding your greens, you're mixing everything together, and you're creating your pile. Then once you're letting it sit for a bit, the microbes start kind of doing their thing. That's going to transition it into the thermophilic stage. This is the most important part. It can last anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. But during this time, the pile should ideally get anywhere between 120 degrees Fahrenheit to 160. I know that this visual says a little, says like different temperature ranges, but it's just like, it's give or take a couple of degrees, I will say. But depending on how hot your pile gets within that temperature range and for how long, typically above like 130 degrees Fahrenheit for like maybe a week or so is going to kill off unwanted pathogens. If you're composting like garden scraps or like weeds that you might pull from your garden, 145 and above for 72 hours kills off any weed seeds that you don't want to be sprouting from your compost that you put on your garden, right? Anything above 160, danger zone. We're killing off beneficial microbes. We don't want that. But yeah, and then so once it's kind of done doing its thing, we get to the second mesophilic stage, and this is just the curing stage is what people refer to it as. So during this time, mostly like it's just kind of the final breakdown of things. The temperature drops. The compost is just kind of, imagine it aging like a fine wine, if you will. But that's kind of what the process of composting is in a nutshell. But moving on to like available composting options in New York City at this point in time. So if you yourself are not like maybe running a community garden where you're taking food scraps from folks and actively turning it into compost on site, wanted to mention a couple of like other options that are available at the moment. So we've got curbside, we have food scrap drop-off sites, and we have smart bins. So I'm gonna start with like food scrap drop-off sites real quick, and then I'll move on to curbside smart bins. I know it's the photo in the center, but I'm gonna start with that one. So food scrap drop-off sites, these are kind of indicated by like the like green bins, I'll say, and also they can look like different bins. Sometimes you'll see decals that say food scrap drop-off site here. But these are usually run by community composting sites. So that can be a community garden, it can be perhaps a local composting site, maybe a site that is run by any of the compost like groups that are funded by city council. So those are going to be like green, maybe a drop off at like a green market, for example. So like Union Square Green Market, that's run by Lower East Side Ecology Center. There's a food scrap drop off there. These sites only take mostly plant-based food scraps, or mostly plant-based ingredients, I should say, and eggshells. So they do not really allow anything like meat, bones, or dairy, or anything greasy to be dropped off in those bins. And these usually get taken to, they're either composted on site by the community, or they're taken to like a municipal level composting site. A really good example of that is Earth Matter on Governor's Island. So that's a little bit about the drop-off sites. There is a map of all the drop-off sites in the city and also the orange smart bins on Sanitation's website if people want to look up maybe after this meeting, like, well, where can I drop off my food scraps? I will redirect you to that site. But really quick, for curbside and smart bins, curbside is now required in all 5 boroughs, but that just consists of acquiring like a brown bin like this, or like a curbside organics bin from the Department of Sanitation. And for like your co-op, your brownstone, your complex, wherever you may be, and all of your organics can go in there. So like plant-based scraps, meat, bones, dairy, greasy pizza boxes, uncoated like paper plates and stuff like that. So all of that can go in those bins. And same thing for the smart bins. So all of those like, what did I just say? Meat, bones, and dairy, pizza boxes and stuff like that can go in both curbside and smart bins. Just want to put that up there. But for curbside, you put the bin out on the curb the same day as recycling, and sanitation picks it up. There can be a little bit of like bureaucracy battles when it comes to curbside, in which case like maybe you're dealing with like a superintendent who's overwhelmed and doesn't want to, you know, put a bin out, or like you have to talk to landlord, you have to talk to neighbors. Like there are a lot of resources for curbside and talking to landlords, and also like more information sessions about curbside on Sanitation's website in their FAQ section. And yeah, last but not least, smart bins. Those are accessible 24/7. You just have to have the New York City Compost app to open them. I personally have never used a smart bin before, so I'm not entirely sure how the app itself works, but you need an app to open it. But once you have the app, the smart bins are open 24/7, and you can drop off food scraps in them like whenever you find yourself near one. Versus like for food scrap drop-off sites, typically those you have to check the hours of whichever site you're going to, because they may be only open like a few days a week or from this time to this time. But yeah, stuff from curbside and smart bins gets taken to a digester egg at Newton Creek wastewater treatment plant. So that's a little bit about like the differences between like where curbside and smart bin stuff goes versus like a food scrap drop off site and where all of those are taken. So that that is all I've got for this composting for beginners presentation. I am
you.
not sure how long I went, so I will leave it up to facilitators to see if we have time for questions.
Yes, we have another presentation coming. However, I have thank you so much for such a great presentation, and I can guarantee the participant that I will follow up with you so they can have some materials for this great presentation. We have 2 questions so far. Is there a
Awesome.
way to generate energy from the heat created in a compost pile? Is there a way to generate
Let's
energy
see.
from the heat created in a compost pile? That's the first question.
Got it. I can see the questions in the chat.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I can. Thank you for directing me to that. I am actually not sure. I'm not entirely sure if that has been tested at all. I personally would love to learn more if that is a thing, but I'm not personally sure. I would think that maybe in a perhaps like an industrial composting site in which the piles get really big and really hot, maybe I'd like to think that it's possible. Like maybe whatever technology exists for harnessing like geothermal energy can be applied to compost, but I think we might require some sort of engineer for that. So I'm not sure. And then for the second question in the chat, I see, do meat scraps affect the health or cycle of the compost? So it depends on like what the compost site's size, basically, the capacity of the site. So the reason that some sites and smaller sites don't take meat scraps is that their piles might not get hot enough to kill off like pathogens that can be found from like animal products. So like typically smaller sites and community sites take predominantly like vegan recipes, but I'd say for like there's a really massive industrial composting site in Staten Island, Fresh Kills, and they do take meat scraps, and they do like it gets turned into compost, and because their piles get really, really hot and hot enough to kill off like pathogens that you might find in animal products. So yeah, like it just depends on the compost site itself and how small it is and what you can handle. I do see another question in the chat, which is how much of New York City waste is currently diverted to our composting sites and what is the goal? I don't have like an exact number off the top of my head. I would actually have to look this up. I apologize for not having a direct answer for you. Yeah, I'm actually not sure. I can ask my supervisor at some point and see. We definitely have data. We definitely have data about this. I just don't have it accessible at the moment. So I apologize. Does anyone have any other questions?
Any more questions? We can take one more before we get to Prospect Park Alliance. Anyone with a question? Let me see if there is any hand raised. I don't see any more questions. I will ask you if there is anything you didn't cover that you want to cover for now, and please put the email on the chat. If members would like to contact you directly, you can do that. But I can promise you all that I will follow up with you with any materials from this presentation or anything that we might need. That's the first presentation on composting. This is definitely not the last one. Yeah. I have
My question
Miss Adele Bennett. Sorry. Yes, Miss Bennett.
Questions in the chat.
Yes. Oh, I recognize Miss Bennett. A question is on the chat.
Yes.
Question is in the chat. Was it
I
how
don't
much?
see. Oh no, I don't see
Sorry.
your question.
I don't know how much time they would take, depending on the seasons, really, for the food to decompose.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that? I think your mic is a bit,
Yeah,
I'm hearing a little bit of
No.
yeah, Miss Bennett, mic is always, hard to hear. But she has a question, and I wanted to know if she can put that on the chat.
It's in the chat now.
Did you see it, Echo?
Was your question the question about how much waste is diverted to composting sites? Was that the question
No,
that you asked?
that's not her. That's someone else.
No? Okay. There's
I
a
don't.
direct chat. I don't see anything
Ah,
in the direct.
no. So, Miss Bennett, put your question again so we can see it, or you can say it. Maybe we can try it again.
Okay, it's in regard to the decomposition.
About composition?
Decomposition.
Oh, decomposition. Yeah, what is your question about decomposition?
The time of the year, does that matter? Will it take different seasons?
You're breaking
I'm sorry,
up, Adele. I can't
I'm struggling
understand you.
to process what
Yeah.
you're saying through your mic. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I can't get it myself too. So.
Oh God.
In the meantime, if someone else has a question.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? Cheryl.
Sure.
The curbside pickup, the retainer, what's the best way to get one and how much do they usually run?
So you can request one through the Department of Sanitation's website. They should be free. I can drop a link to the sanitation's website in the chat if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I know that we want to have everything from ECHO tonight. However,
I will say,
there will.
Sorry, you go. I was just gonna say,
No, you can go. You can go. No.
If people want to learn more about composting in detail, the Master Composter Certification Program is restarting this year. If people have heard of it before, but it's like 7 composting workshops, and the Ecology Center is hosting 2 workshop topics in January and also in February. And I can put a link to check those out as well. That's all. I will stop.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. And she will be back again. Don't worry. She will be back again. I will ask the presenters from Prospect Park Alliance to get ready and take the screen and start getting ready while ECHO is putting information in the chat. I know that
Yes.
Naima will be presenting from Prospect Park Alliance. Now you can take the mic. Good evening again.
I think I was going to present. This is Deborah, but Naima will accompany me. Let me just
put the slides on there.
Oh,
let
Naima,
me-
the slides up. I see. Thank you.
Can you see it?
Yes, thank you so much, Naima.
Good.
Well, it's good to be all with you. I know it's getting late and you've had a nice long presentation on composting, which was really interesting. So I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. We really appreciate being invited to present to all of you and hope this becomes like an annual tradition. So we'll just quickly take you through some updates from the past year, what's going on in Prospect Park. So Naima, if you want to go to the next slide. Starting my presentation, just giving some updates on different types of improvements that are happening in the park and funding that we received from the city in the current budget cycle to make those improvements. Some will hopefully be exciting for all of you given your location in Brooklyn, but we do have a nice amount of funding that we've raised to date to restore the waterfront along the park's 60-acre lake, which takes up the southern end of the park, from Parkside and Ocean over to Park Circle. We are restoring the full perimeter. The reasons for doing so are manifold. We have Brooklyn's only lake. It's a very popular spot for picnicking and strolling, but it really has fallen into disrepair. The lake is over 150 years old and hasn't had a major renovation for a very long time. So this project's going to create new ways for the community to enjoy the lake. There'll be new pathways and sitting areas and plantings. We're going to be creating habitat for all the wildlife that likes to spend time at the lake, and then also helping with stormwater resiliency, which is something that does affect communities south of the park, maybe a little further west than the location of your district. But we are trying to implement different ways to help retain water at the lake and help to prevent flooding that happens from severe storms. We also really received funding in the past year to get the funding goal we needed to renovate or to start the renovation of the main restrooms that are located at what we call the park's children's corner, where the carousel and the zoo and Lefferts Historic House are. That restroom has been in a really bad state of repair for a very long time, so we're looking forward to restoring that. We also did really nicely with participatory budgeting and received funding to make improvements on one of the main paths that connects the east and west sides of the park through the woodlands. And Councilmember Joseph is always very generous with the park in terms of her capital allocations. So one thing that you may be aware of, we're about to embark on a major restoration of the Ocean Avenue perimeter and the Parkside entrance. And there's going to be a monument coming to the park at the Parkside and Ocean entrance. So that project actually is slated to begin sometime this year. And we continue to get additional funding to help support that project. So Councilmember Joseph gave us additional funding to continue to make improvements down Parkside Avenue. And also funding to help improve the pathways at our Lincoln Road entrance. So all of that was very good for us. We were very excited. In terms of expense funding, we were very excited to get $50,000 from the council speaker to help support the programming that we are doing at Lefferts Historic House. I know that in your district you have, I'm so sorry, I'm going blank now. It's a historic house we work very closely with, and I'm forgetting its name right now, so I apologize. Wyckoff, thank you. Wyckoff House. So I don't know how familiar you are with Lefferts Historic House, but over the past several years, we've been really transforming our programming there. We have actually are completely refocusing the museum activities and exhibits to focus on the history of slavery in Brooklyn and the role that the Lefferts family played in the slave trade, as well as building relationships and helping to educate the public on Lenape culture and history. So the funding we got from the speaker is helping us with our programming. The photo you see on the presentation right now, that's actually a beautiful installation that was made by a Brooklyn artist that is hanging on the Flatbush Avenue facade of the house. And it pays tribute to 12 African, no, how many, Naima, how many African descendants? I'm like forgetting now. I'm sorry. I'm a little tired. 12, thank you. So I think to date we've discovered, I think up to 25 Africans who were enslaved at the Lefferts House. We've been doing a lot of research, and this artist created panels, and each panel represents and celebrates one of the ancestors who were enslaved at the house and their stories of resilience. And this is the type of work we are planning to do more of at the house, and we're really excited about it. Naima, you can go to the next slide. One of the unfortunate things, and I feel that your committee probably is well aware of this, is the budget gains for the Parks Department was not good at all in the past year. In fact, they were the only agency who did not see cuts restored. You might remember in the last fiscal year, Mayor Adams kind of made cuts across the board to many agencies. And by the time that he released his FY25 budget on July 1st, basically every agency had seen those cuts restored except for the Parks Department. And it's even more unfortunate because, as many of you know, Parks Department already has a very, very under-resourced budget. It's only 0.5% of the city's budget, and it is not. It's not at the level of funding it needs to really sustain our park system. So here's just sort of the notes of what was incurred and what continues to be incurred in this budget: a $20 million reduction, 800 less staff, a hiring freeze, one of the lowest numbers of parks enforcement officers in many, many years. So the Alliance, the Prospect Park Alliance, we've been trying to play a leadership role in helping to advocate for more funding for parks because all parks, including Prospect Park, rely on the city for basic maintenance and trash management and keeping our parks safe and accessible. Playfair, I don't know if you're all familiar with Playfair. Hopefully you are, but that is a coalition of parks groups who are campaigning to get the city to advocate for more funding for parks. Even though, the city at the end of the day did not restore cuts to the budget, we did really strengthen our standing with the city council. The city council really went to bat for us with the mayor, and there were some wins. One is that the mayor did keep inside the budget, amongst all the cuts, a program that was piloted last year called Second Shift, which provides a later shift of maintenance workers in parks during the high season, and that rolled out this fall. And then the council provided funding to fund urban park rangers and Operation Green Thumb and tree stump removal. So I think one of the best things that parks advocates can do is get involved in the Play Fair campaign. They have regular communications and petitions and rallies, and it's a really great movement to be involved in for anyone who cares about their parks. Naima, you can go to the next slide. This is just a little update on how last year looked for us. 2025 was a year of highs and lows and everything in between. Prospect Park Alliance, we like to say that, so we have an operating agreement with the city to help operate Prospect Park. We are a private nonprofit organization. We like to say that our work is mainly like the green and the blue, which is like we take care of the park's natural areas, the meadows and the woodlands and the waterways, where the city is responsible for basic maintenance, trash management, keeping, all the infrastructure running. Some of the programs that we had running last year, which are continuations of other programs we've had in the past, a lot of these programs, or some of these programs, got started after the pandemic or during the pandemic when there was a real significant drop in city services, and the Alliance kind of took on a bigger role than we normally had in the park. So on the upper left, you see our Green and Go volunteer program. So this was a program that came together due to the fact that there was like a huge drop in the city's ability to manage trash, and there was a huge number of additional people using the parks during the pandemic. So we created programs where everyday citizens could come to the park and was equipped with trash grabbers and trash bags and help pick up trash. And that program was successful and continues to this day. On the upper right hand, I love this photo. It looks so dramatic. But another thing the Alliance has been doing is privately funding just basic infrastructure repairs in the park, things that the city should be taking care of. So what you see there, believe it or not, is some of the pipes and infrastructure that's underneath the lawns that helps to drain stormwater and help keep, pathways and the park drive free from flooding. So that's just some repairs that were happening over the summer. On the bottom right, you see trash pickup. We entered into a partnership with a nonprofit called ACE New York, which helps provide transitional employment for the formerly homeless. And through that partnership, we were able to provide extra cleaning crews in the park, basically from April through October. And then on the bottom left is just a program we've had for many, many years, one of our signature programs, one that we'd love to get more youth involved in CB17, which is a paid employment program for high school youth where they spend their spring, summer, and fall in the park. They work with our landscape crews, and they learn all about landscape management, how to take care of plants and trees and woodlands. It's a great like growth opportunity besides the fact that they get to earn a nice salary, and we provide educational career opportunities for them through the program. So it's a really wonderful program, and we're actually going to be kicking off recruitment soon, so we'll be sure to share information to see if there might be youth in your district that might be interested in getting involved. Now we can go to the next slide. Capital improvements last year, there still is this year too, lots of capital improvements happening in the park. Some of the things you see here are just sort of new things that happened in the last year. We opened a new adult fitness area in the park near the band shell where we have the Celebrate Brooklyn. That got funded through participatory budgeting, and we did another adult fitness area through participatory budgeting in the parade ground. So those are really popular and fundable through the budget limitations of participatory budgeting. Through participatory budgeting, we also created a nice shade structure in our Harmony Playground. On the bottom right, you see through some state funding, restored some paths around the Long Meadow. And one of our biggest projects, which hopefully will be opening soon, is the restoration of the Soldier and Sailors Arch at Grand Army Plaza. So that is pretty much complete. There's still some site work that needs to be done to make the area safe for public access, and we're sort of working through some red tape with the city right now to get the final funding we need to secure the site and be able to open it back to the public. Naima, if you want to go to the next slide. One thing just to, that's not in the slideshow, and I apologize, but again, projects that are coming up this year that we're really excited about. The most significant one is the restoration of the Ocean Avenue perimeter, the Parkside entrance, the installation of the Shirley Chisholm Monument at Parkside and Ocean. And we're soon going to also be debuting plans for a new pavilion that will be next to the monument that'll provide public restrooms and exhibit panels and performance spaces to help complement the monument and the visitors that will be coming to the park to see the monument. So we're excited about all these projects, and we'll definitely keep the community informed. And we're also going to be kicking off work at the northeast corner of the park, the landscape that borders Flatbush Avenue. That is an area that hasn't seen any revitalization in almost 50 years, and we're going to be creating some beautiful new destinations there, a beautiful sensory garden and a children's play area and a picnic lawn and a pavilion with restrooms. So that's another project that will break ground this year, and we're really excited to see it come to life. And looking at, this is a great slide because I had mentioned to you our Reimagine Lefferts initiative, where we're really transforming our exhibits and programs at Lefferts Historic House. That is the artist who's created the beautiful installation that's currently on our exterior. The other photo there is actually some of the interior of the house. For many, many, many decades, ever since it moved to the park at the turn of the 20th century, the house has been programmed like a traditional historic house. So the rooms that the public would go into were the formal rooms that the Lefferts family would use to entertain guests. And what we've actually done is removed all the historic furnishings from those rooms. Those rooms now are for rotating exhibits and for community gatherings. And what we're now about to embark in is we're conducting research into the areas of the house that we believe are where the enslaved Africans lived and worked. And once we do that research, our hope is to restore those rooms and be able to open those to the public to give people a sense of what life was like at the Leopard's Homestead through the eyes of enslaved Africans. So we're really excited about that work, and the planning for all of that will be starting this year, and we will be engaging the community around it. Naima, I think I have one final slide. Oh, couple. This is about new health and wellness programs in the park. We're very, very much trying to bring partners into the park to provide health and wellness services. As many of you might know, during the pandemic, a lot of people dropped out of care, and the health organizations and hospitals, they feel like they haven't seen the return to the medical offices that they had before the pandemic. People have, dropped out of care. So they're looking for new and innovative ways of reaching the public, and we've been really excited to partner with them. So in the upper left-hand corner, you see a photo of a mobile medical unit, a fully equipped, almost like medical office on wheels that has been coming to the Grand Army Plaza area of the park. We're hoping to also bring them to the Parkside and Ocean entrance. That particular unit is by New York Presbyterian, and it's specifically focused on sexual health, so HIV and hepatitis C, although anyone there gets a full examination, full kind of primary care services. And on the right-hand side, you see one of the DOE summer meals trucks, which actually came to the park through the advocacy of Councilmember Joseph. And this past summer was in the park from while school was closed from the end of June through the end of August, and I think they served about 15,000 meals. So it was very, very highly engaged and utilized. And on the bottom left corner is a wonderful pilot program that we're continuing to offer in a different form called Open Air Care Connections, where we basically have community health workers that are out in the park connecting with everyday New Yorkers, asking them about their mental health and well-being and connecting them with services. So that program ran last spring, and we're about to kick off in a couple of weeks' time in a new variation on it called Connect to Care, where we're going to be having free lunch and learn presentations in the park at the Prospect Park Boathouse on all different types of topics, from diabetes to hypertension to mental health to maternal health. And at many of those events will be also offering screenings. So Naima will be sharing with the committee and the board information, and we hope to have community members come and join us in the park at the boathouse. I think we have one last slide. Yes. Finally, just on a high note, we have been trying to offer more food and drink options in the park. This is a photo of a pop-up cafe that we've had running at the Prospect Park Boathouse. We recently just brought to the park a new mobile coffee and pastry vendor that's at the Children's Corner entrance to the park, the one that's on Flatbush near Empire. And, again, we're just continuing to try to offer new food options in the park. So that was my final slide. I know we're getting late now. I don't know if your meeting was officially supposed to stop at 8:30, so apologies.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
know
no
I have Miss Trisha who said that she visited the Real Imagine Leffords and Social
Oh, okay.
Whispers, and it's a great, excellent
Yes.
work. I have the email for the Lunch to Learn, the Connect one.
Yes.
I have that email. The email I don't have is the one for the employment for the youth.
Yes.
I would
Yes.
love
We
to receive
haven't.
that information for, yes.
Yeah, we're about
I
to
also
just
have a
start.
question on the chat.
Oh, yeah, of course. I was just going to say with the youth employment, we're going to be preparing our announcements about recruitment for that soon. So we will send you that flyer as soon as we have the information.
Okay, thank you. I want to recognize Ms. Marcela Flores for a question. I don't know if you want to read it or if you want to open your mic, Ms.
Yeah,
Marcela, and ask it. Yes.
I wrote it in the chat. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was really interested to learn about the health programs that you have at the park, and I'd love to get involved in them. However I can. I'm trained as an HIV scientist, and I've been in HIV for many, many years, and so I'd love to learn, to go to the lunch and learn. And if you need any volunteers with specific subject matter expertise, I'd love to join.
That's so wonderful. Well, one thing we can do is like find out if there's ways to connect you to the mobile medical unit that we've been running with New York Presbyterian, because that is focused on sexual health and HIV and Hep C, and see if there's ways of how, if they've been engaging any volunteers through that program. And in terms of the lunch and learn, we're going to be sharing information with everyone. Right now, we haven't been recruiting volunteers for the health and wellness programming, mainly because for all of them, we've been partnering with a health, like a social service or health institution, and they've really been populating the program. We've really just been not just, but we've been providing the space and the venue and the, promotion. But definitely we can keep you in mind. I think if you want to share your contact information. Oh, you sent it. Great. So my colleague Naima will, or I can actually take your contact information. We're happy to follow up with you and share information on ways to get involved.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Great. Well, we appreciate, again, being invited to come this evening, hoping this can become an annual thing. I think also, Berlotta, were you still in touch with Nicholas from CB9 about a potential convening of parks groups? I feel like you may have had a meeting at the end of the calendar year, perhaps. Oh, I think Berlotta might have frozen. Well, in any case, it's late. Don't want to extend the meeting longer than it needs to be. Don't know if Naima, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I think we looked for that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't see or hear anybody anymore.
Oh, I think we're waiting for Miss Antoine to close the meeting, maybe.
Ah, okay. I see.
I think the mic is out.
Yeah, I feel like she was frozen. I'm not sure.
Is Farah still on the call? She's at the community board. Maybe she can close the meeting if Miss Antoine is unavailable.
I'm still on the call. I can close the meeting. I wasn't sure. Did Miss Berlotte say that she wanted the meeting closed, or?
She
didn't
did.
say anything.
No, she didn't. I think she's frozen or unavailable.
Let me try to get in contact with her to see what the situation is.
Okay.
While we're waiting, we could probably open up for questions, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer further questions or.
Yeah, Berlotta.
Yeah. Oh, this is so nice, Carol. I'm so glad you've been going to events at Lefferts. We really love Friendsgiving is a wonderful one. And we had an amazingly successful Juvet exhibit in 2023 and have definitely continued that partnership and continue to do programming with some of those wonderful cultural producers, Sandra Bell and Juvet Fest. So glad to hear you've come to the programs and volunteered in the park, and thank you so much for your participation.
You're welcome, Deborah. My daughter volunteered with the Alliance during a few summers ago, and it was a great experience for her. But when I visited Lefferts house recently, I learned a lot about the enslaved people who also built that home.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that house was destroyed during the Revolutionary War and rebuilt primarily through the labor of enslaved Africans. And it's a very interesting story. And we're very interesting. We got a grant. We're going to be doing archaeological research on the house, which is going to be so interesting to learn more about how the house functioned and was lived in during those times. So we're excited to be able to take the community through that process with us. And we should be doing some kickoff events this winter.
Thanks again. We say Prospect Park is our park as well.
It's everyone's park. We like to call it Brooklyn's backyard. So we want to be the park for all of the community. So we're so happy to hear that.
Take care. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I don't know. Do we still stay? Should we all still stay on or?
Spoke to Miss Berlot. She said that you know, that the meeting is pretty much close to the end. You know, you're free to leave, but we would need, I think, committee members to make a motion for adjournment before we can really call it an end.
I make a motion that the meeting be closed.
I
This is
second.
Jackie Williams. I second the motion.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining the meeting, everyone. I really appreciated your presentations, and thank you so much for the committee members that came out. The meeting is officially adjourned, so you guys are free to enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Take care, Sarah.
Thank you so much
Good
for
night,
having
everyone.
Have a good night,
Great
everyone.
presentation.
Sending much health to the community. Bye.